I'm Scott Goodwin. I'm the Managing Director of International Markets for NetSapiens. And I'm here hosting today in what I hope will be a podcast talking about being 2030 ready in the VoIP market. What am I looking for to get out of today? Well, a couple of things is that we've got people around the table and joining us from America that are actually shaping the market as it happens. We're at a particular inflection point in the market as well, where there's lots of things that are coming together that will mean that there's going to be a radical change and difference in how that we've done business in the voice sector. And I think we're going to get an insight to what that is. So I'm quite excited about today.
Hi, my name's Mike Mills, Managing Director of Service Providers at Gamma. Been in the industry for, crikey, I think 20 years now. And I think for this conversation today, I bring a slightly different lens. So in my role, we work with all the major hyperscalers across UCaaS, CPaaS and CCaaS. And also, I'll probably come at this with an international lens because I own our international expansion plans. So for me, kind of putting all that together, I think it would be great to have some conversations today with some other industry leaders around where we see the market going. I think it's massively dynamic right now, and to see the opportunity for service providers, and I think talk that through with other people will be a good thing to achieve out of today.
Hi, I'm Trevor Lovelock. I'm the CEO of Cotu. I've been in the industry for coming on 20 years, and I think what I'm really fascinated by at the moment is the emergence of so many new technologies that are really exciting for the industry. But also a big challenge for the industry in terms of how we can help the industry to adopt the services that are available now. So I'm quite keen to see how the discussion goes today, not just about the tech, but also about how we can enable the market to actually adopt it.
My name's Ian Fishwick. I'm the chairman of Simply AI. I've been running tech businesses in the UK for 4 decades. And to me, this is one of the most exciting times that I've seen for a long time. Between now and 2030, I'm absolutely convinced that agentic AI is the big new thing. And to me, voice will be the gateway to the use of artificial intelligence effectively. So I'm really keen to understand, particularly as we've developed a plugin that means we can operate with effectively any hosted telephony platform, whether the panel agree with me that that's what's likely to happen over the next few years.
Hi, I'm Jeff Pulver. My title, I wear several hats, so I'll just say that I am the chair of the vCon Foundation, and I'm most interested in understanding where you all see the market in 2030 going, because I'm quite optimistic about where we are today and the future of communications.
I'm Jon Brinton, Chief Revenue Officer at Crescendo, the home of the NetSapiens platform, where we power about 250 service providers' voice offerings globally. And I'm most excited about this conversation about 2030 because it really is about unlocking the value in those conversations that we have with our customers and those around us, and how to use that for greater business value than we've ever been able to achieve before. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Right, so I guess I will kick off as I am the man in the chair. So let's give a kind of positioning statement, I guess, which is the claim around this table is that the next 5 years will shape voice and unified communications more than the last 15 years did. But before we defend or demolish that, I guess who in this room and in the United States believes that or thinks it more like vendor theatre? John, would you like to give your thoughts?
So I actually think this is probably less hype than opportunity now. I think in our industry, we've been directionally right about trends, but maybe wrong about the precision on timing. And since you guys had referenced the past 15 years, we've gone through this transition to VoIP from classic, traditional services to VoIP networks, where these conversations all flow now in a way. And with the rise of the AI tools and new standards like the vCon standard that we'll talk about in this webinar, that we really are at a point where I think it's the renaissance of voice services, and that we can unlock the power that's in a lot of these conversations. And I think we'll definitively be achieving that over the next few years. So I'm extremely excited about where we are.
Thank you. And finally, you, Mike.
I think we're at a really interesting inflection point in the market. We've gone, as we've all talked about, we've gone from kind of on-prem, copper, analog, digital services through to SIP trunking, into hosted PBX, into unified communications, at which point it was a feature war. We've now gone to it where the UCAS layer is, I think, broadly normalised. But the real opportunity next is what do you then begin to layer on top? And how do you build more incremental value on top of a stream? I think voice communication, you look at all of the market data, voice minutes, structural decline in pretty much every market. So anything, and I think this has the propensity to do that, that begins to turn that graph upwards, I think is a really exciting thing for everyone in the industry.
Yeah.
Could I just add something there, if I could?
Yeah, sure.
That if I look at the last 15 years, we went from some space to what I'll call the dark ages of telecom. Because in the US, we certainly enabled, while SIP happened and voice over IP happened, we also opened up robocalling and spoofing and all sorts of bad actors. So I'll call that the dark ages of telecom. And what we are seeing is a true renaissance. And with that renaissance, not only is voice cool again, but 5 years from now, I believe people entering the market who start working in business will never understand how we used to do business the old way. I think it's going to be so different because we're living through the age of AI, where AI for business happened a number of years ago, and people entering the workforce 5 years from now are going to be entering it where it's already been part of it. So the idea of having truly unified communication in the enterprise is something which new to us won't be new to them. And the way we do business, the way we communicate is going to be inherently changed due to changes that we're invoking today. So yes, we're going to go from the dark ages, seeing the renaissance, and the future much brighter than anyone saw coming.
I always think there's an interesting generational lens you put on this, which is kind of our generation always spoke. The next generation, it was always texting and not speaking. The latest generation, it's all about communication again. And when that follows itself through the workforce, that's, yes, I think, a really interesting leading indicator as to how voice is used. I mean, how many people's kids send them a WhatsApp note rather than typing a message now? It's definitely a demographic age thing.
Yeah.
And I think that makes this an interesting conversation as well.
Well, I think it's a good touch point for, I think Ian wants to talk about it later as well in terms of what is possible from this technology. And so we talked about this inflection point what I wanted to start the conversation on was really around the kind of foundational layer for why we're entering into this space now. So I would guess with conversational AI, new standards like vCon, and I'm going to lean into you, Jeff, next on this, and next generation platforms, some of the developments that you're doing at NetSapiens, Jon, as well. It's paving the way for what I think a lot of the analysts are predicting as being, two different paths that you'll go down. It'll either be hyper-verticalized offers, or there'll be frictionless, broad, general offers that you will have. It seems to me that that's where the vendors are betting it's going to go, and certainly the analysts seem to be kind of echoing that. So if we start with the kind of why, and I guess these things are starting to come in place now. Jeff, could you just educate us a bit in terms of how vCon is one of the key pillars that are helping shape this new world and why that plays such a pivotal part, this new standard?
Well, it's taken a while. I mean, this is the first time in the history of computing, the internet, that there's now going to be a standard for capturing conversations. So I look at a vCon, it is literally just a file format, but it's a file format that's understood by the underlying large language models. And that's a change agent. And what we're now really talking about is the ability for conversations to be assets, where we're able to create memories that we can prove happened, those conversations, and at the same time have the guardrails enabled so that we could do compliance at scale. And so having conversational assets in the flow and being able to not just have one conversation, but be able to link all the logical conversations that anyone's ever had at any period of time together creates a total recall space where knowledge will be available at the fingertips for all those who want it. And this will change how business works. So the vCon standard, it's just like it's a PDF for conversations, in the sense that we now can take a conversation and share it across the company, across the network, across the world. And we're able to, my friend Thomas Howell would say that a vCon is a robot food for AI. And I get that. And really for me, the output from the AI connected to the vCons is the brain food for us. and the ability to start adding value, even on a wholesale level, to enable SIP trunks to be AI ready, is enabling the ability to capture conversational assets at scale and be able to co-connect those dots and start doing things which certain industries in finance, for GDPR purposes, for HIPAA in the US and certain states in the US and certain governments around the world, there's a need to manage user data. There's a in fact, it's law, you have to enable digital rights for certain people and certain citizens around the world. And now we can, and we do that at a large scale. So the coming of age of the vCon skit, supply chain integrity, transparency, trust, one of the guardrails for vCons, it became ratified as an RFC this week, which is meaningful because now that's official. That's RFC, I think, 9943. So there's a chance that our RFC will be 10,000, which I'm really hoping for. But in terms of business significance, we're now going to be talking about the ability for companies, people working in a company, being able to manage the conversational flow internally, do reporting, cross-connect conversations that they've had with their customers, with support, with development, with marketing, with research, with finance. If you're working in any type of company where there's where there's a hierarchy of power, where people report to people and so on, instead of being a reactive business, we get to be proactive businesses. This is literally going to change the way information flows. If you're a publicly traded company and you need complete transparency, you now have it. There'll be no excuses why certain things are not reported in real time, because now you can. That also means when you're dealing with customer support, issues can be elevated and acted upon. This is just a change agent.
I assume true ownership comes into that as well. A kind of a immutable proof of what can be passed on, what can't be passed on. There's a kind of redaction element, which also would become part of that.
Yes. Now, I have to say that this being a protocol, a file format, it is up to the systems that deploy it to enable the redaction, to enable the permissioning, to enable the ability to remove consent and manage consent. The protocol was created with regulators at the table, so that it wasn't a rework. Oh, what about regulation? Sitting at the IETF inside the vCon working group are regulators, as well as some of the founding creators of SIP. And together, when deployed, this is going to enable companies, service providers, individuals, and really the world for the first time to do things that were never before practical or possible, that became enabled because we're on an IP infrastructure. So, and combine this with a time that AI is now there, we're talking about having agentic AI agents being able to have memory. If you think about a chatbot of the past and a chatbot that can happen, I'd rather talk to a goldfish, because at least a goldfish allegedly has 3 seconds of memory. Most chatbots that I use today don't remember that they just answered that question for me 3 minutes ago, and I have to re-explain the problem because what they told me didn't work. And now we have the ability to capture memory with trust and enable it so that it has the highest quality signals with the lowest latency. So for our customers' networks, they're going to be really happy with these technology changes. It will redefine unified communications, because for all these years, vendors and everyone have been talking about unifying communications into an enterprise. What about once it's inside? And I do defer to Ray Ozzie, who created Lotus Notes, because I think what he was working on in the 90s was transformational. And the ideas of Lotus Notes and Domino and the ability to have knowledge, information, and a whole wisdom in the elders can be deployed today thanks to vCons. It will take some Imagineering and some core technology, but the way we do business in the future will be so ancient, people will think, when they look to what we did. How did you do that? With what? How? Yeah. And we did.
So, I mean, it sounds like it's one of the core foundational pillars to take us on the journey that we're about to embark on. I guess the other part of delivering almost individuated customer solutions or developing hyper-verticalized offers is also going to fall on people like yourself, Jon, in terms of NetSapiens providing effectively that lump of clay that service providers can then shape entirely in their own image. So could you talk to us in terms of what the plans at NetSapiens are?
Sure. And just for our audience's understanding, we're looking, so the NetSapiens platform powers about 250 service providers globally in their business and residential UCaaS offerings. And we're looking for, from our perspective, at what is the right time to fully adopt the vCon standard in our platform, because it is in process of hopefully being ratified by the IETF, the group that sets standards for our industry, later this year. And when does that become something that we fully adopt in the platform? As Jeff said, it becomes the PDF of these types of communications, whether it's voice, maybe over web chat, text. That's part of the beauty of this. Mike talked about earlier how people have preferred methods of communications. The vCon standard captures all of those and is able to, link them into a conversation based on the Imagineering and the additional work that's been done. But what we're seeing is, one thing I love about my job the most is we have those 250 service providers. We're the operating system or platform they build their offers on. How they choose to go to market, it varies greatly across that group, and many of them are extremely vertically focused as part of our original kind of tipping off point on this. And so what they're looking at is, how do we take that conversation intelligence, what is captured by the vCon, and how do we maximize the business value that customers in specific verticals can get out of it? And I think our most successful partners are extremely familiar with their customers, know their businesses well. And so they're really excited about building and continuing to build these type of enabling solutions that just help them perform better, whatever the goals are that they're looking for. So for us, like I said, it's a renaissance for the voice conversations we're having, which will lead to significant additional ability to get the intelligence that exists in these conversations and provide better solutions for end companies and organizations.
So I was just going to say, could I bring you in, Trevor, here, just at this point, which is, I mean, you're living and breathing this kind of intelligent layer. You're doing the voice AI elements of it. I mean, what are you seeing today that's being deployed? And more importantly, what is the pace at which it's moving at? And where do you see it kind of a year from now compared to where it is today?
Yeah, certainly in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, we've seen a lot of interest and growth in awareness of what's possible, which probably wasn't there a few years ago in terms of conversational intelligence. So to the points around vCon, I think what's interesting is businesses are waking up to the fact that there's this treasure trove of insights that are buried in those calls that they've had. And it's not necessarily in the CRM or the ERP or the traditional systems they've turned to make data-driven decisions. It's in those voice conversations, and they want to now unlock the insights within those voice conversations. So we're seeing a huge uplift in interest from businesses looking to deliver business value based on the information they can pull out of the calls. The challenges we find is the variety of different environments that obviously those businesses are using, mobile, fixed, different platforms, different networks. So actually, how do you get the standardized approach to actually give them insights? So I can definitely see a huge value in platforms like this and standards like vCon in making it easier for businesses to actually unlock the value that they're looking for from calls. But for me, it's not about the technology. The technology is exciting and it's definitely an enabler. But the exciting part is the value that you can deliver to those businesses that are looking to do, improve their customer experience or increase their sales throughput or whatever else they're interested in. It's how do you help them to actually leverage the technology that we're all familiar with to actually achieve those outcomes that are really important to them as businesses.
Mm-hmm. Mike, you were going to build on that?
Yeah, I think Jeff and I have kind of spoke on this a few times, and I think there's a really interesting debate about where should that technology sit. Does it sit in the network? Does it sit in the platform? I think my current perspective is it's probably best sat in the platform that's aggregating all the data points, because if you're a telco, you're not aggregating the mobile traffic, you're not aggregating the necessarily, or you might be if you're a mobile operator, if you're a fixed operator, you're aggregating fixed. If you're mobile, you're aggregating mobile. If you're messaging, you're aggregating messaging, etc. So probably the platform's the right place to put that join point, I would say, for all the conversational data. I think the other interesting part on the foundational layer is actually whether we all like it or not, this comes back to good old-fashioned telco plumbing being optimized. Mm-hmm. Is it HD? Is it low latency? Is it jitter-free? If you don't get any of that, the conversational data is not accurate. And therefore, the kind of, for me, there's a foundation layer, which is the physical data coming in of the requisite quality to allow this to do its magic, for AI to work. And in most of the use cases I see, that's where it fails. And Jeff, maybe, I know we've talked about this at length, and I'm sure Ian's got hugely valuable perspective, but it might be worth just kicking that round for a minute and saying, actually, if we solve that, does this go more quickly?
Well, I think the other thing there is that on that, call it that base foundational layer as well, is there's a lot of heavy lifting being done, which isn't necessarily sexy by the network components of it, but it's becoming increasingly more compliance orientated as well, isn't it? And particularly multiple jurisdictions are not providing a uniform method in that as well. So that can't be ignored as part of the mix.
I mean, Ian, maybe you could add a bit of context given what's...
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm unusual. I sit on both sides of the fence. I set up what was one of the 10 biggest service providers in the UK and sold it in 100 million exit. But now I'm a chair of a vendor, an agentic AI vendor. Whenever we've launched a new technology, typically it's taken 18 months, and Gamma's seen this several times, to get from a great idea to actually sales at volume. And one of our challenges is how do we reduce that 18-month period? And if you think through what happens, it's not necessarily massively technical. It's how do you get people aware enough to come and listen to have demonstrations, understand how they can make money, then they try it internally on themselves, then they'll find a few friendly customers, then they'll have just perhaps one or two sales guys who become champions of it, and eventually they go, this is a good idea, and we get going. And I think there's a major upskilling issue here, where certainly in the agentic AI world, how you write prompts is almost the new telecoms engineering. We've got to upskill, thousands of telecoms engineers to say, we've almost gone back 50 years. Agentic AI is rubbish in, rubbish out. Even if the underlying technology is great, you write a bad prompt, you'll get a bad answer. So there's a huge training piece. The technology that you're talking about is interesting, but that's only one part of getting to volume sales.
Yeah, it's the enablement. It's how do you get it in the hands of the salespeople, the engineers, to take the business outcome and engineer that into.
Can we just do that for a second? Because sometimes we forget that half of the UK population works for enterprises and half for SMEs, and the bulk of the service providers are aimed at SMEs. Now, they tend to adopt some of these things later than enterprises, and they're trying to solve sometimes a much simpler problem. I'm a plumber under a sink. My phone rings. It'd be great if that phone could take a booking for me. The nature of the problems I'm trying to solve are somewhat different.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's because I guess the landscape that is being painted here is that you are going to start to get, I guess, where the margin will remain will be in these hyper verticalized offers, where you've got to become really, really niche. You can remain broad, but if you remain broad in terms of your customer offerings that you'll just have to be hyper efficient, frictionless across your business. It's the only way the margins will be there to sustain. You can't carry an unwarranted overhead if you're in that kind of, if that's where you seek to remain. But if we look at that hyper verticalized offer, and if that is where the landing point that we're going to, where do we feel that the delivery methods or the partners of the future are going to be that will deliver that? And again, Jon, I'd like to see your viewpoint on that, in particularly what you're seeing in the States. Are you starting to see the emergence of vertical players?
Yeah, we are. Let me pause, Scott. Let me pause real quick. I thought Jeff wanted to throw something in on that last point,
Jeff,
and I have learned to listen when he has some great insight. So go ahead, Jeff.
Well, actually, I was deferring to you to hear you, but I just want to amplify something that Mike was bringing up also, is that as a result of what we're seeing, the cacophony of where we're at in this moment in time, as we leave the dark ages of telecom and we enter this renaissance, well, we're going to start to see a transformation, an opportunity on wholesale and retail telecom for, get this, premium payments for voice. You see, because the age of agentic AI is going to drive the need for higher quality signals and lower latency, maybe not for your consumers, and maybe not for some of the enterprises, but those enterprise customers, particularly those working with voice AI companies, they need it to be successful. I've spent just this week talking to 7 other voice AI companies. We're all speaking the same language, and they understand they need to pay a premium for HD voice and low latency. And what they understand with the, so when you look at the race to zero, which unfortunately we did see over the last 20 years, there's now a recovery. And it turns out that if you happen to own network infrastructure, if you happen to be a communication service provider with infrastructure, you're going to be able to do things that over-the-top companies just can't do. And to wit, you're going to actually see on a wholesale basis a market emerge that people walked away from before. And I think we need to understand that when we can start treating conversations as assets, we're now upping the ante as far as the value that everyone can start selling to their customers or their customers' customers down the line. This is going to transform telecom and create a new term. But we're not, even on wholesale, because we have new asset classes to sell. And this is just a different way of looking at what we've been talking about, where it's not a commodity anymore. Part of it will be, but we now have this new opening available. So I do believe we're going to start it's not about LCR. LCR will be there. I think LCR died already. It's just we're living a long half-life. What we're going to see in a replacement is the opportunity to enable a new type of customer who's sitting there wanting to work with enterprises, particularly doing agentic AI deployments until it's called something else. But the whole idea of being inside that layer of telecom layer, enabling the AI, working closely, leveraging the infrastructure that exists, is going to bring forth new revenue opportunities, things that we never had, that none of us did to make it happen. We're just living here. I was promoting HD voice starting in 2008, thinking, oh, gee, is people going to buy it? And by 2016, a lot of people abandoned it. So we're off by 10 years. So it's going to happen soon.
But isn't that so often the case that happens?
Yeah. And so just before Jon goes, I just wanted to say that due to the circumstances we're in, we're going to see new revenue opportunities on a wholesale basis, on a retail basis. And we are going to be the enablers of that future. And the point is that a vCon connects voice, transcriptions of voice and video. It gets the text messages, it gets email, it even does faxes. And all forms of future communication you could wrap with it. I'm seeing people using it from machine to machine and stuff. The thing is, it's a standard for conversations. And up to the ingenuity that in this room and others, you're going to see people doing things we just didn't think we could do before. Jon?
Yeah, and I think kind of what we've talked about, because we're all in this vertical and it's our industry, is some of the building blocks for, I think, Scott, as much as the hyper-virtualization conversation, it really is another conversation that you touched on, the frictionless conversation, and how you take these kind of 3 or 4 or more building blocks, which are all ready now. I mean, Jeff and I started having conversations about vCons over 3 years ago, and we're finally to the point where we're putting at Crescendo with the NetSapiens platform, the stake in the ground, saying we will support them natively in the X software release that we have coming up. But Trevor touched on conversational intelligence. The AI agent may be at the front of the call. There's offerings out there like that. We have one. I've got feedback in the last week from a customer, totally satisfied with the response they've been getting, diverting over 60% of their conversations by the agents being able to answer the conversation, and then a portion of those go on to a human that actually addresses the customer needs. And part of the concept with this vCon is we see these as like different technology building blocks to enable that journey. But the vCon captures all of that conversation, whether it was with an AI agent or not a human, and then the transition to the human, and then the ability to look at those afterwards, get intelligence out of them, score them for quality, for sentiment, and that's why we need the HD voice type of concept. Is you want to be able to transcribe and have a record of that conversation that is extremely accurate, but be able to add that value. And now what an end customer ends up with is something that really does. I always call it the customer willingness to pay. They have a much greater willingness to pay for that because it allows them to support and retain their end customers. And what they don't know is that, in our case with our licensees or service providers, they've taken those building blocks, put them together, presented that solution that drives the outcomes for their end customers to them. And they're pleased because it does create substantial value for them. So it's extremely exciting.
So it strikes me, I mean, the title of this podcast was 2030 Ready. And it feels very much like this isn't an opportunity problem. This is an executional problem.
Correct.
And I'd be curious to get everybody's input on when you look at the way that we are structured as an industry today, our go-to-market capabilities through very much a long-tailed, fragmented channel proposition tends to be what looks after the small to mid-sized businesses. How do we feel, and maybe I'll point to you first, Ian, as being one of the men that built some of the biggest channel players in the UK. When you look at how we are today, how we are set today as an industry, when you look and knowing what is to come and how it needs to be solved, when you look at the state of the market, the state of the players in the market, and I guess there has been a long tail roll up that's been going in the marketplace as well. There's a lot of technical debt that exists in the market today. Is how ready are they to execute on that? So we talked about 2030 ready. We could debate whether it's 2030 or 2035, but in your feeling, as somebody that built some of the biggest,
there's several parts to that. Let's start at the top level. The problem for this industry for several years has been revenues are relatively flat, but costs are rising. So when you come along and say, I've got a brand new product that doesn't cannibalise any of your legacy revenues, this isn't kind of PSTN to hosted, this is something completely new. You've never been able to make money before out of WhatsApp or chatbots or email generation or unanswered calls, and it's good margins. Will you listen? Clearly the answer is absolutely. We've been crying out for something like that. All of us talk about AI. The vast bulk of us don't know what we're talking about. The real problem is, how do you tell who does? Right. So to me, there's a huge accreditation problem where we're going to have to very quickly find a way of having stamps that says not just you're approved to be able to deploy this technology and understand prompts and how to do it, but also sales guys. I don't want this technology destroyed by people over-promising things. I've seen that too many times. Right. So I really think that upskilling of the industry is absolutely key. But going back to your verticalisation bit, is where does that occur? I'm an agentic AI wholesaler. I have two fundamental tasks. One, I don't want to go to an SME and say, I can solve a small problem by creating a bigger one. You want a booking solution? Well, I'll tell you what, rip your phone system out and I'll give you a brand new one. That's way too complicated for them, right? So our job is to make sure that we can do a plugin that works with as many of those as possible and get rid of the rip and replace problem. But at the other side, we must make integration as easy as possible so that if someone like Trevor comes along and says, I've got a fantastic opportunity with a dentist, we can go, integrating a dentist CRM is no more difficult than integrating. Somebody asked us yesterday for there's a specialist beauty parlour CRM. I didn't know that. Wonderful if there is. Somebody did it for car dealerships last week. So our job, I think, at this level is not to verticalise, it's to be the enabler that allows people like Trevor to go and verticalise as much as you want. I think that's the key.
I think you'd be talking to very much what Jon thinks about how we're positioning it at NetSapiens, but I'm the independent moderator. But Mike, I know you had thoughts on this.
Yeah, and look, I think as lucky enough to have been through Gamma's kind of, we helped power the channel that Ian was involved in, and I think what that channel gives you is amazing boots on the ground, feet on the street in every corner of a market. And I think the key for me is how do you enable that in a way where they can do what they're good at. And and I think of the examples over the years, the sort of when we sold an inbound product on top of an ISDN line, it was exactly that. To your point, it's take a product, add value on top, make it simple, Don't make it rip and replace. And I think that really works. So I think the kind of enablement, upskilling and ongoing management of that and making sure that the people at the front end who are delivering it, maintaining it, supplying it, designing it, they're all keeping up with the technology change is probably one of the biggest problems. I would also add one final point that the UK is broadly unique in its channel approach. Mm-hmm. So when you look at other markets, you look at the German market, it's telco dominated. 50 regional telcos, 4 big telcos. Australia's more telco dominant. France is much more telco dominant. The UK is the only one where broadly the reseller and the channel owns the end user. So I think it's uniquely positioned with a unique challenge and opportunity with all of this technology because it can get out more quickly. We won the SIP race because we were out ahead of BT. That's what a channel can do if you get it right. And I think the key for me is how do you get the enablement right quickly? Because the product is there, it does what it needs to do, but you need to get it out there in a way that the end users see value and the partner understands how to deliver the value.
But to your point is that history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes. I remember the late 1990s, early noughties with the dot-bomb crash that happened there. There was lots of promises that were made that didn't materialise quick enough. They did materialise, but they just materialised much later. Do you think we'll go through some of that with this, in that it'll take subtly longer than you think to do?
I think we invented the internet, but we didn't quite know what we wanted to do with it, and that was the issue. I mean, the other day I spoke to Nadeem Zahawi at YouGov. Who would have ever thought that sort of a research company was one of the first big internet success stories? We just didn't know what to use it for. It's very, very different now, I think. There's people are crying out, once you show people what this technology can do, they just say, I'll have it tomorrow. But I think we also have to have AI to train the people. We've been developing, as Trevor knows, prompt genies, where, how do we teach people and make them self-sufficient to be able to write prompts? How do we write AI checkers that can say, that's not a good prompt, that's like 6 out of 10? Because what we can't have is thousands of service providers all ringing service desk and saying, my prompts don't work and it's not, we've got to find a way of automating that and using AI to do the training as well, I think is the next step we've got to go through.
Do you not think it needs to get to a point, though, where you don't need to do that?
Yeah.
And that's where it needs to get to quickly if you want to go mass market, is it just knows you talk to it like you would a normal person. And I think that's where it's going next.
Too far off that point. So we've already started to experiment with the concept of essentially using a voice AI as like a voice AI consultant that you have a conversation with, like in a natural sentence, to explain, I'm a small business running a florist or whatever that small business might be. I need somebody to answer the calls when I'm busy doing floral arrangements, staffed use case. But if you can get to the point where a small business owner or a service provider that is helping that small business owner can have a natural language conversation with a system, and then off the back of that, it produces exactly what you need in a completely frictionless way, that's ultimately going to massively accelerate the adoption. Yeah. I'm kind of with Ian. I don't think we're in a similar situation to the kind of the earlier internet piece, because there's such a line of sight to the business value that these technologies can provide. I think what's interesting is like there's this massive hype about AI, and it's really exciting in a way, but a lot of it is just hype. Whereas when you bring it down to some of the things that we're doing around things like voice AI or voice analytics and the ability to unlock value for businesses, they're really tangible use cases. And what I love about the channel is the channel are in with those businesses already. And that verticalization piece, the channel is great at that because they already inherently have a really deep level of understanding of the businesses they serve. And many of them will be like specialists in the education sector or the health sector or the retail sector. So they'll take that inherent knowledge and they'll craft a proposition that really speaks to that particular vertical and helps that vertical to understand how to get value out of the technology. That's what the channel does really well. Yeah. So I think that's what's
Can we show some practical examples? When you're doing big enterprise AA, it's all about, what's the return on investment? It's not that complicated with an SME. We spoke to a car dealership the other day, right? And he said, on my service line, I get 2 types of calls. I don't really want the Ian, you ringing up and say, can I drop my car off tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock? Because I don't earn any money from that. What I do want is the phone call where I say, I'm really sorry, but your bill's likely to be £2,710, and they talk through, because that's where they earn their money. So the ability to say, well, shall I just give you an agentic AI that will separate all those things for you. Wonder if you can do that. We did it very quickly. Next minute he says, I've got 6 garages. That's going in all of them. He meets his mate. Suddenly it's in teens of garages in Northern Ireland, right? So they're not complicated things to explain. They're just practical day-to-day problems when you haven't got a lot of people.
But, but it does beg the question, this, which is, so there's a couple of things that I see. I mean, I bet Jon can talk to it extensively about, there's an EVP program at NetSapiens, and we're constantly being approached by organizations, not necessarily startups, but people that are building agentic AI into the space. So there's lots and lots of, the barriers are reducing quite to low levels to allow people to come in and offer services and add that layer over the top. What becomes the moat at that point?
Shall I start that one?
Well, I was going to say, Jon, could you just maybe you could just give us a kind of feel for, you know, what you're seeing in terms of people approaching you and the scale of the startups that are starting to wanting to do those services.
Yeah, to give some context, kind of to, you know, what Ian was talking about earlier, is kind of make it able to be plugged in and to be used. We see the NetSapiens platform, like I said, as an operating system. We have an ecosystem partner program of third parties that will take our APIs. I mean, we have a modern API structure that they can take and easily develop and integrate into, take our APIs, build their applications on top. And it's really that competition which is driving a lot of the innovation of people bringing these solutions to market. And we are seeing quite a few, but I would say that there might be many, but there's also many that have really what I would see as valuable innovation that they built. So what we have to do kind of for us is to protect our licensees and the partners, because you just don't want somebody saying, yeah, we work with that platform and then not have it work, is have the structure around it where they are formally engaged with us through this program. We give them a sandbox to our system, access to the platform. We have support agreements, but we are getting many vendors that are joining that because we have a large addressable base, but also because this competition that's out there with many of the tools today are driving innovation that's incredibly impressive. So, you know, we don't have to invent it. We need to be in a way that in a place that we can enable it, and also coach them on how do you make it trainable for a salesperson, understandable for a customer, easy to use for an administrator that's using it as well, so that it just doesn't become something that becomes a tool that they can't manage. So that's extremely exciting for us right now.
If I could just add a couple of things. One of the things I think is needed is education. Re-education across the workforce, education across the telecom industry, education everywhere, because we're all learning right now. We're not necessarily sharing what we're learning. And we think about like I was listening to everyone speak here, but there's an assumption that everything we know is shared, is intuitively understood by everyone else who's speaking or not speaking, and that's not true. Even in organizations where I'm talking to the CTO and their co-founder, they don't also speak. And so we have the possibility to do unlimited things right now. Maybe we always have. But we're now living in the time where a lot of that possible becomes practical and doable. But at some level in the channel, there's an education process that is needed. We need to manage expectations. We need to have people understand we're not perfect. We're still in the early stages of something that's revolutionary. And maybe the technology is the same tech that will get us there. But just how LLM models are always evolving, so will we, so will our products. And not every demo we're going to show someone calling a florist or a pizza shop in the US. People are going to actually have demonstrations which work that are close to home. Part of the other need we have is to start educating customers to ask for the greatest common denominator of what's out there. So often people are so been trained in telecom to go cheap, ask for the cheap minutes. What's the cheapest I can get there? You know what? We have quality, we have respect, we have technology stacks, which you can now build upon. And for all those weekend vibe coders out there, we now have solutions which we can integrate with. And this is a game changer. We didn't have this 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You know, if you're into Legos, it's like all of a sudden 5 new building Lego blocks have just been born. And now it's up to us to figure out, and others who are with us to figure out how we can use that. And so there's great opportunity. Hype, gosh, there's so much hype out there, bigger than the dot-com boom hype. Absolutely. But then again, when was the last time you saw a $1 trillion IPO? I haven't before. And so I think if the sky is the limit, literally anything and everything can become possible in our lifetime. It's just a matter of managing expectations, knowledge transfer, awareness, and setting realistic goals so that we can bring to market things which we know are not perfect, and work with customers who want to be the alpha testers and the beta testers, and understand that their input is going to help us understand the future together. Because by the time we get to 2030, I believe these will be issues long past, because we're moving so fast with it. Whether we like it or not, AI is pushing us fast.
So you think we're being conservative with 2030?
I think this is a 2027. I think it's moving that quickly that this becomes a 2027.
I think you're going to see carriers around the world are going to start having to deal with their latency. They're going to have to deal with their quality, because they're going to be companies know nothing about telecom. If the people I'm talking to is any representation, but they in the laboratory, the technology works. At deployment, it fails. And why? Because they never understood that if you're talking to somebody, humans naturally like to interrupt each other. And so if you're talking to an AI agent and there's an interruption, the AI knows maybe where they got interrupted, but what they don't know is what the human heard. And they certainly do not know what the human remembered. And so we have this loop. And so vCons come in critical path here, where they could be used to help put together the pieces of the conversation. And in certain industries, of course, they'd be used for all that compliance stuff. And I just think that we're at the dawn of a new age of communications. When I got into this industry in the 90s, I looked at the Von conference as being at the intersection of AI, of internet and communication. And now what I'm focusing on is the intersection of AI and communication. And it's a brave new world. Some of the people we're the same players, but there's a new generation of folks coming in that together are helping to define what the future will be.
Thank you for that. And again, just a quick pop quiz. Are we all on the same page that this is faster than 2030? Probably. So you got Jeff and you got Mike saying, 27.
I'm always probably optimist in that sense. I just think the market will take time to actually catch up. That's why I think the sort of 2030 horizon feels more realistic. Doesn't mean that there's not massive changes that will happen in 2027 and 28 and beyond. But I think it's going to take time for this level of technology to actually be adopted. Like I sometimes joke, if the whole world stopped R&D tomorrow, it would still take most of the industry 10 to 15 years to catch up with where we are now. Like, we live in a technology bubble. We take this stuff for granted, right? Mm-hmm. When you step outside that bubble and talk to the plumber or talk to the hairdresser or talk to the average business, they're not thinking about this stuff.
The only point I'd make, though, to challenge that a little bit, is we've all been talking to Alexa for 10 years. What do you think that is? We're all talking to Gemini. We're all talking to ChatGPT right now. This is just that, but it's just delivering a business outcome. I mean, I don't know if you saw in the US, T-Mobile have launched real-time translation via 11 Labs when you're in a call. Mm-hmm. That's ready, that's available as a service. So I think, yes, it's going to take time to get it to the plumber. Yeah. I totally agree with that.
I'm going to say, I think that's the key issue. What do I see within the 27? I see over the next 18 months that most of the service providers will have been trained and they'll be operating at scale. So the start of the scale rollout will be around about November, December 27. But to roll it out across X million businesses is going to take 3 years. So in a sense, you're both right. By 2030, you'll start to see mass adoption. Right, but I think that's a great one. It does take time, but you have to train the telecoms workforce out to be able to roll this out at scale.
Do you think it's the telecoms workforce? Do you think it's the software provider? Which is the interesting question.
Let's do that one, because your question was, what's the defensive mode?
Yes.
I would argue it's not technology at all, on the basis of, in 4 years' time, can you say that your voice is better than my voice? Can you say that the way you can do a booking on a is better than my booking? There's only so many limits you can do that, right? So I don't think it is technology, and I think the analysts get that bit wrong. I think it's more about, if you can get yourself embedded in a proper go-to-market distribution system, right? And a bit like, Gamma ended up having about 5,000 people selling their products, even though none of them were on the books, because the way you dominated the service provider channel. It's that distribution mechanism that I think is the key to this.
Yeah, I definitely see that sort of synergy. Sorry, John.
No, I was just going to chime in on that adoption thing real quick. Is that I think we need to delineate to availability versus adoption. In that, one thing at NetSapiens, every year we have our annual user group meeting that we get all of our partners together for several days. We have it coming up in October in Austin. As part of that, we have an event called CodeFest, where our partners demonstrate the applications they built using our APIs. 2 years ago, we started having kind of these AI-enabled, the type of the applications we've been talking about here, being demonstrated by partners. Last year's event, so think about last October, there was quite a few that were extremely impressive. Applications that were AI-enabled, kind of driving conversational intelligence and delivering these business outcomes. So in this year, we've added some new categories of innovation just because we know what our community is doing. So I think we're at the point where, from an availability perspective, kind of like Mike talking about how long we've been talking to Alexa, these things are available and they're viable. And what we're going to see now is that, the question is, what is the adoption curve across the markets? And that is always over several years, over a longer period of time. But I'm excited about what our partners have available for customers to consume today.
You asked about the moat. I think there's three very tangible moats. There's the distribution network that Ian's talked about. The fact that the partner is in the customer is moat number one. Mm-hmm. Moat number two is you're going to need some form of connectivity to run this over. If you're selling that, you're in the conversation. And I think number three is telco compliance. It is a regulated industry that software do not understand. And that in itself becomes an opportunity for the channel to differentiate if you're owning all of that as a proposition to the small business.
Oh, can we just take that one? I mean, the ability to say we can answer calls through SIP, through conventional telephone numbers, we can have humans and agents on the same PBX that can seamlessly transfer calls backwards and forwards. That's the bit that the software guys don't understand. They don't understand the practical telecoms piece.
Yeah, totally agree. Telco as a niche, a complicated, slightly ugly, fragmented niche, doesn't fit nicely in a software world where you might want to go and get your number out of your CRM. You've had the number 25 years, they don't support porting, that doesn't work properly. You've got an archaic system.
Practicalities.
Yeah, the real life practicalities become somewhat of a moat for the channel.
But the counterweight advantage that a software organisation would have, particularly if they're dealing in a vertical, is they've already got a very deep understanding of the business processes that exist within that. So we as an industry, I think particularly in the channel, it's basically had pre-packed products and then apply a margin to it and then go and sell it to an end user. Is what the software industry has had, is the ability to solve a whole load of business problems, create productivity within it, in some cases dominate a sector, become the go-to, or if I'm in the legal sector, I always go for a Clio or something like that. They have that advantage. They know how those businesses intrinsically work, and it's become increasingly easier to just add a voice service to it.
But what I can tell you with 100% confidence, so we work with every major cloud communication software provider. Jeff talked about the dark ages earlier. Mm-hmm. We'll go to the dark ages for 2 minutes. In an agentic voice world where software is the first application, I can tell you today, 99% of our fraud and misuse is from the software-led folk. 99% of all misuse. Mm-hmm. Put agentic comms at the front of it, you turn the dial 10 or 100x if you're not careful. So I think people get lost on that. And yes, it's the optimum route into the business, but it's also the weakest possible link from a misuse and a fraud perspective. Mm-hmm. We've got to be really careful. We don't open this technology up and people's networks get, how many people take a phone call today if they don't know the number? Imagine that in an agentic comms world when it's spoofing a number and it's delivering the call to another business. It potentially magnitudes the dark ages 10x. And I think one of the caveats I would say is we've got to be really careful that does not happen.
Well, but why regulators exist.
Mm-hmm. But yes, but the regulator can regulate it, but it can't stop it.
Yeah.
So the reason the regulation globally is getting harder is because nobody wants misuse. And different regulators in different markets are taking different approaches.
Yeah,
how they handle agentic voice and how they handle agentic authentication that Ian is who he says he is, or you are who you say you are, is a problem we've not figured out yet.
I was going to say, can the regulators keep up?
No,
with the rate of change?
absolutely not.
Okay, but it doesn't change the fact that everything I'm seeing is there is massive latent demand for this. Some products you have to spend a long time educating, why do you need this? This is one of the few ones where within a 30-minute demo, you're not just selling it to the customer, they're then selling it to the mates and saying, I've just seen something incredible. What's your experience? I mean, you're doing this every day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think people are blown away when you demonstrate the technology to them. As I said earlier, I think it's because it's so easy to understand. It's so tangible. Like every business can have a use case for it. When we initially took these services to market, it wasn't a verticalized proposition. It goes across every vertical, every horizontal. So it's been incredible in that sense. I think the challenge it keeps coming back to is how do you enable the market to adopt it? The technology is ready. The technology is capable of doing some incredible things, but the market, the skills are not there at the moment to actually deliver it at the pace and the scale that we need to get it into the hands of all of those businesses. So it's back to that kind of enablement and awareness education piece.
Sounds like you need a channel.
So I'm conscious of time. I think this is a topic we could have gone on for another hour with, but we've got friends who've got hard stops in America with us. If we could just kind of tie it up in one question to give to all of you is, if it appears that it's not 2030, it appears that it's 2027 or early 2028 is there. What does good look like to you, Ian, in terms of that service provider that is building profitable revenue streams, delivering on good customer outcomes? What does that look like to you?
I'll start with the hosted market for a minute. The very big guys, the Ring Centrals, the 8x8s, are probably big enough to develop their own stuff. But the bottom 2/3, probably not, right? And all of those hosted telephony vendors have really got to decide on a strategy within the next 6-12 months, I think. Then they've got to have champions in. Nothing works unless you have champions inside that will pick it up and run with it really, really, really hard. And I think we've got to sort of almost set the end of 27 to say, you have to be running at scale by then, or you're just going to get left behind, right? So to me, my ideal world, the vast majority of all the small and medium-sized hosted telephony providers said, this is the way we've got to do it. And 5 or 6 of the really big ones, like my friend over here, say, right, let's not reinvent the wheel, let's just get on with it. The technology's there already.
Okay. Jeff, what does good look like to you?
Good would mean having the regulators have a forward-thinking ideas as far as how to deal with AI. And so that for people who are deploying systems, we understand what compliance needs to be so that we could be pro-compliant ahead of time. Because that's going to be an issue that's going to make some people fumble in terms of what are the compliance issues in AI, particularly in the States, because of some political issues we have here. From a technology adoption perspective, I would be really excited to know that the ecosystem has grown, that silently some of the major companies were all going to not only deploy agentic AI, but they're going to be new customers, new revenue sources for our telecom friends. And because in order for the voice AI companies to succeed, they need a partner. And they need to be the new type of customer that's going to be partnering with the telcos, working hand in hand. And so we're going to see an uptick in revenue. And so I believe we're going to see a knowledge transfer, awareness. We're going to see people opting for and asking for highest common denominator in terms of the quality available, the technology offerings available. And the biggest sign is we're going to see a thrash of developers come into the marketplace to do it their way. They're going to take a look at the building blocks that we've now presented them, and we're going to start seeing services that we never thought about that we not from the boomers so much, Xers, maybe some boomers, but really go down to the millennials, the Gen Zs, and the Gen A. We're going to start seeing services that we look and say, who needs that? They're going to say, gee, now we have programmable voice. We can do things we couldn't do before. Bye-bye. And they're going to be on their own. And it's going to be cool because we're going to be able to support what they're doing, and it's going to help everyone. And so I expect an influx of startups. I see an influx of investment. And more in store, I'm going to see more change. because there's going to be competition. And that competition, as we enter the renaissance of voice, is going to drive the quality higher, revenues up, and the opportunities bigger than they have ever been. And the telecom industry can go up, I think, $1 trillion in value over the next 5 years. It's a big number, and I'm not being hypish. So,
John, I
thank
see you nodding there, John.
Well, I was going to, add I 100% aligned with Jeff, and it probably matters a little less, Scott, what this looks like to me, because we grow through our successful partners. Our partners have been independently benchmarked to be growing at double the rate of the market. And so for me, our challenge is to give them the tools that they need to innovate by adopting these meaningful standards like vCons, by enabling the integration of applications, and help them drive their innovation and their vision for what they're looking to do. So I'm 100% aligned with the concept of innovation coming from new categories and people that we've never thought about. We've seen that in our recent new additions for licensees or partners for our platform. So for us, the mandate is give them the tools, give them the structure, help them enable their vision, and then help them develop their go-to-market if they need that additional assistance, so they can connect with and communicate with their customers in a meaningful way.
Be the canvas to let them paint.
That's right.
Yeah. Ian. No, I've already come to you, haven't I?
Again.
So if we could close with you, Mike, maybe.
So I think good for me is a bunch of things. One, it's the foundational telco layer is ready to meet this requirement. Two, there's a regulated environment that allows it to flourish whilst ensuring that the bad actors are kept out. And then for me, it's about saying to the market, here's a set of services and capabilities that allow you to go from broadly a sales motion, which is price and feature led, to a business, and I hate to use the word business outcome, but everyone's kind of using it as sort of solving a real business problem with this technology, so that it actually makes, and you keep coming back to the small business, the typical small business, 3 times more efficient, because that all of that will grow the economy at a macro level. If you ignore all the sectors, if we're making, and you use UK PLC, more efficient, more optimized, better, we all win.
Trevor, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, I suppose 18 months from now, what I'd love to imagine as a kind of position that we're in then. We have amazing technology now. I think it will get better. There are some challenges to adoption, and I think the channel is a great place to kind of solve that problem with people and awareness and education. Hopefully 18 months from now, a lot of the technical problems will be solved, and actually that a rate of adoption, that rate of scale will just be a thing to sit back and enjoy to some extent. Because there is, to the UK PLC thing, there is so much extra value that can be unlocked for the UK economy and the global economy. So that's why it's such an exciting time, and I think it will be a really exciting time for the next 4 or 5 years. We just need to all work really hard together to make it happen.
Yeah, well, we're very much see this as being, one of the fundamental pillars of our strategies moving forward. I think the speed at which this is moving at as well, we intend to do more of these types of updates as well, gathering a broad range of ideas and people that are operating in the space and leading it as well. So it's great to have you here sharing those thoughts. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for suffering some of the technical issues that we had at the beginning, but great to have your input. Thank you once more.
Thank you. Grateful to be a guest here. Thank you all.
Take care, guys.
Great seeing everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.